Today's episode is proudly sponsored by Pyxis Lab, the leading manufacturer of inline and handheld monitoring technology for fluorescent tracing chemicals. Pyxis has quickly become a trusted name in the water treatment industry, offering high-quality inline and offline analytical devices that measure key parameters. Pyxis believes that water professionals deserve better. That's why Pyxis endeavors to bring you the best when it comes to the tools you use to monitor your water treatment programs. Have an application? Pyxis has a solution. Go to scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis to find out more. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Pyxis, Pyxis. Pyxis, because water professionals deserve better. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, the podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm Trace Blackmore. I get the honor of hosting this amazing podcast. And Nation, I say amazing because we are going to hit 400 episodes by the end of the year. And that is just amazing to me. I remember when I first started on this podcast, I learned what to do by starting my own podcast. I made a lot of mistakes. How we numbered in the beginning was definitely one of those mistakes, but now we all laugh about it. I learned so much because I started the experience, and I just want to go on record by whenever you do something new, whenever you do something for the first time, you are going to be nervous about doing it. Now, I did a TED-style talk for the Mastermind last year. That was episode 325, and that was where we gave you a sneak peek into a live event that we have with the Rising Tide Mastermind. And I start off in that episode by talking about the butterfly effect. And Nation, I call the butterfly effect anytime you do something that gives you the butterflies in your stomach because you've never done it before, because you don't know how to do it, because you don't know what's on the other side. Well, I promise you, success is on the other side, and you're going to grow by going through the entire process. And when you get that butterfly effect, when you feel the butterflies in your stomach, you know you are working on the things that are within your comfort level, and you are stretching those as far as you can. That's why you disrupt the butterflies, and you're going to be more comfortable with more things on the other side of that. Well, that was definitely the podcast for me, and I learned so much during this journey, and I had no idea that this show was going to become one of my new passions. I absolutely love bringing you a brand new episode each and every week. And I love all the guests that I get to talk to. I love all the things that I get to research for you. So I'm bringing you great information to make you raise the bar in your game. I have just become such a fan of being a podcast host, and I never would have done that if I did not get over the butterflies in my stomach. So look forward to the butterfly effect. And if you want to hear my TED-style talk, go ahead and listen to that episode that I mentioned earlier. Well, Nation, something that we've been doing for a while now is Legionella Awareness Month, and that's going to start on August 2nd, and a brand new episode each and every Friday we will release around the topic of Legionella. Now, each and every year, we try to find the best guests to allow you to expand your knowledge about Legionella and other waterborne pathogens, so you can take that knowledge and you can educate your customers. So you're giving the best information to the people that are making the decision. We want to help you with that, and we're going to start on April 2nd with Legionella Awareness Month. Something else you want to mark your calendars with is Industrial Water Week. We have celebrated that since its inception. And Industrial Water Week is going to start October 7th. And of course, we're going to start with Pre-Treatment Monday, with Boiler Tuesday, Cooling Wednesday, Wastewater Thursday, and then we're going to wrap it up with Careers Friday. And we're going to help you celebrate with a brand new episode each and every day so you can celebrate in style. And one of my favorite things to do during Industrial Water Week is look at when people post their social media post with hashtag ScalingUpH2O and hashtag IWW24, their cakes that they have on Friday. So many companies are celebrating with an Industrial Water Week cake. And I love seeing those. I love it when on Boiler Tuesday, you take a picture in front of your favorite boiler. When you're at a water softener on Pre-Treatment Monday and you're taking a picture of a water softener or a DI machine or whatever you are around, I absolutely love that. So please help me celebrate through all of your pictures and make sure you're taking a picture each and every day and you are adding those hashtags IWW24 and Scaling Up H2O. Nation, one of the things I hear from Scaling Up Nation members is they are always delighted when I let you know what is going on in the future in our industry so you can mark your calendars and you can go to some shows you might not have known about. So the first one we're going to talk about is Water Jam 2024. That's just fun to talk about. September 9th through 12th in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Water Jam is put on by the Virginia Water Environment Association and the Virginia section of the American Water Works Association. Water Jam is a fun show with over 250 exhibitors and a tremendous amount of hands-on demonstrations. So by all means, check that out on our events page. Another item that you want to check out, and I hope you go to this one because I will be there. It's the 2024 Association of Water Technologies Annual Convention and Expo. That's going to be taking place September 10th through 13th in the Louisville Convention Center in Louisville, Kentucky. Nation, this is one of my favorite shows. I will be there. I'm actually going to be there a day early for the business owners meeting. So if you are a business owner within the Association of Water Technologies, there is a slammed packed day with all sorts of speakers letting you know what you can do within your business, how you can make your business better. And you are going to leave with so many ideas. In fact, I am one of the speakers at this year's Business Owners Conference. So I hope to see you there. I hope to see you at the convention. Make sure you come up to me. Let me know what you think about the show. I love getting feedback. Today's show is all about feedback, but more about that a little bit later. I hope to see you at that show. And the last show I'll mention is the 2024 Executive Management Conference, October 20th through 23rd in Miami, Florida. This is hosted by the Association of Metropolitan Water Agencies, and we're going to have all of that information on our events page and more. I mentioned 3 items, but there are so many items up there. If we know about it, we want to let you know about it, and we do that by sending you to scalinguph2o.com/events, or you can just go to the webpage, go over to our events section, and you will see everything we know. And if you find something that we don't know, don't keep that to yourself. Let us know that show, and we will get that on our events page as well. So many people are planning their calendars by going to scalinguph2o.com and going over to our events page. And I've gotten some tremendous feedback on it. And I, of course, say thank you, but I want to let you know that is because of the fine work our fine staff here does at the Scaling Up H2O podcast. So thank you guys for all the hard work that you do to make the Scaling Up Nation's life a little bit easier. Now, here's a question. You're probably wondering, what are your customers thinking? What is your team thinking? How do you find out more? And even more importantly, what do you do about it once you find it out? Well, all those questions and more are going to be answered on today's interview. Here it is. My returning lab partner is Brian Katarski, Vice President of Sales and Marketing of AquaPhoenix Scientific. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Trace. I'm excited to be on for a second time. Watch out, Mark Lewis. I'm coming to try to be the most requested guest on Scaling Up, so watch out.
You are coming after the record. And I just want to do the additional plug that the Scaling Up H2O podcast is the official podcast of the Brian Katarski Saturday lawn mowing routine.
That is absolutely true. Yes. So I look forward in the summertime to Saturdays so I can plug in and officially listen to the podcast. And it's my favorite thing to do while I mow the grass.
Now, are you one of the people that amps me up to 3 times speed and listens to it that way?
When we talk in person together, it's always weird because you're so slow. I'm used to hearing your voice go way faster in my headphones.
So apparently I talk slower than I guess people consume me, but that's okay. As long as people are listening to me, that's all I care about.
That's right.
Brian, it's hard to believe the last time you were on was episode 298. You were on telling us all about the things that we could do to make our warehouse and our companies way more efficient. I got a lot of feedback from that episode where people just went out and did what you said to do on the podcast, and they got great results.
That's awesome. No, I think the coolest thing about it was running into folks at trade shows and industry events and having them come up and recognize me from being on the podcast. It was like almost like a celebrity moment, which was kind of cool. So I definitely enjoyed it. And it's one of those fun topics I'll talk to somebody about anytime they want. You can call me and I love talking about operational things and continuous improvement in general.
I'm always so humbled when I hear about the reach that this podcast has. I still think about this podcast where it was 7 years ago. I didn't know anything about a podcast. I got my Bluetooth earpiece and I did the first podcast. I don't know how people listen to that episode number 1, but I still think about the podcast that way. And we're in 98 countries. We got like 20,000 people listening to us. It's just amazing. I just wanted my team to maybe listen to us, but no, it's incredible. So I love that you're getting feedback where people say, hey, we heard you and we did what you told us to do.
Yep. No, like I said, super cool. And I'd love to think it's just your soft, sweet Southern voice, Trace, but I think it's the information that people get from it that make it such a valuable podcast and one that they listen to all over the place.
Whatever it is, I'm just glad they listen. And I have no doubt that so many of the Scaling Up Nation are going to tune in and share this content. That's another thing. So many people not only listen, but they say, hey, Brian Katarski's on this episode. You need to listen to this. So we have a very high sharing metric rating that we track. So I know this is going to be one of those episodes because we are talking about client feedback, really feedback from everybody.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't have to be from clients. It can be from employees, coworkers, heck, even spouses. But I think just feedback in general. And again, going back to one of my big beliefs, which is continuous improvement that applies to not just operations and warehouses, but anything that you do. Feedback plays a very important role in that, right? You can't fix what you don't know.
Do you send surveys to your wife?
I don't, but they're like informal surveys,
Okay.
It's not a formal survey.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how is dinner?
I will say one of the things we did early on in our relationship, we found an app online that asks us both one question each day. And it's interesting because it provides feedback, right? So it's a place where I can't see her answer until I answer the question. And she can't see my answer until she answers the question. And so every day we get one question. It could be really random things. It could be, deep emotional things. It just depends. But you answer the question, you see what the other person put, and it opens up some interesting conversations sometimes, right? But again, just a small example of day-to-day feedback that has an ability, I guess, to open up a conversation that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise. And for me to kind of know where I stand, and her maybe as well. And maybe it's something I wouldn't have thought to tell her otherwise.
You shared that app with our mastermind group, Parable. Is that what it was called?
It's called Paired. Yeah, there's a free version of it that we use. I think you can pay for it if you like, but and it actually tracks like a streak for you. So it shows how many days you've logged on and done it. She's perfect, of course. She's been, like 2 years straight, never missed a day. I'm like, catching up every third day and trying to go back through, but it allows me to go back and kind of add in and still is a way for us to kind of stay connected, especially as much as I travel when I'm on the road.
Well, before we get into the feedback topic, can you tell the Scaling Up Nation a bit about what you've been doing since episode 298?
Busy as can be. When you work for a guy like Frank LaCrone, you're always running around and trying to do more and trying to do better. So work's been wild and crazy. And in my personal life, I think probably by the time this comes out, I'll be a father. So I got
How
for the
about
first
that?
time. I know.
And to name the child Trace, that is just amazing.
Yeah, Trace, or maybe Chris or Mark. I don't know. There's so many good names out there, but it'll be exciting. And again, you talk about feedback. I'm sure I'm going to get a lot of that from the child throughout the years. But looking really forward to that and being a father and getting to enjoy that with my wife.
What's the day to day like of a vice president of sales and marketing?
I would love to say that it's on the phones and selling business and calling on folks. I certainly love that, enjoy it, but it's less of that. For me, it's a lot of coaching and managing and working with the team, and I love it. To me, again, that continuous improvement mindset of how do we get better and how do we improve at all parts of what we do. And when you can empower people on your team to improve and get better, that's one of the coolest things in the world. It's almost like seeing a process on the production floor improve. It's very similar. It's just rewarding to not necessarily make the sale yourself, but to empower somebody on your team to go out and do that. And that like aha moment that they have, right? And then they're able to go and repeat it over and over again because they now have the knowledge and the confidence to go get it done.
Well, let's shift gears and we'll talk about feedback. And I think feedback means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So, what's the definition you want us to use as we're talking about feedback?
So I actually pulled the real definition from Webster, which I don't normally do, but for this I did. So, as according to Webster, it's information about reactions to a product or a person's performance of a task, etc. And then this is my favorite part of the definition. The next part, it says, which is used as a basis for improvement. And I think that's the key to it, right? Feedback you can get, but what are you going to do with that feedback? What are you going to do with what you receive? Are you going to just ignore it, cast it away, or are you going to actually improve from it? So, as I said, anything I do, continuous improvement is a big part. And to hear that of this definition just really got me going like, all right, I'm behind this now. Like, this is good.
When it comes to feedback, I'm sure we've all been inundated just in the day we're listening to today's podcast. I was at the airport bathroom and they had a little thing that you pressed on the way out. I think it was a red frowny face, kind of a straight lined yellow face, and a happy green face. So feedback is everywhere. But as you said, we have to use it as a basis for improvement. So how do we figure out what we need to start collecting within that framework of what we're going to do with it?
Yeah, so I think again, you got to think from a cultural standpoint of your company, and you have to really go into it with open mind. You have to accept that whatever feedback you're going to get, and whether it's customer feedback, employee feedback, that you're going to do something with it, right? And you're not going to just ignore it or justify it away or pretend like it doesn't exist. So I think that's number one, is you have to kind of go into it and look each other in the eye and say, all right, if we're going to ask for this, what are we going to do with it? So you build out a plan maybe around what you want to gather feedback on, and then what your process is going to be to decipher that information, to track it, to look at it, and then ultimately how you're going to implement change with that information you gathered. I mean, high level, that's how I sort of go through it, is you kind of start with maybe the end in mind of how you're going to implement and then work back from there.
So as I left, I went ahead and hit the middle button because there was obviously some need of improvement in the bathroom, but I had been in worse bathrooms. What did they do with that data?
So they probably collect it up, would be my guess. I don't know that for sure, but there has to be a place that they're gathering that up and then using it to make decisions, whether it's to deploy somebody from their maintenance facility or their maintenance staff to go in and clean or fix something in there. It could be as a way to judge the employee who's responsible for that over a time frame. Maybe they're looking at that as one of the metrics for the employee as to how good they are at staying on top of the bathrooms. I know I worked at a restaurant in Ocean City, Maryland. Shout out to Hooper's Crab House. Got me through college. But bathroom cleanliness was like such a big deal to them, right? And they would have loved to have this thing back then. But they had a system over the loudspeaker that they would call, I think it was a code blue or code something that they would call. It probably should have been brown, but anyway, it was a sign that you had to go clean the bathroom. So the managers and the owners were they said, look, if the bathroom's a mess, people are going to assume the kitchen is too. So if you keep the bathroom clean, they're going to think everything's clean. And so anyway, that was like their way of gathering feedback. But yeah, we would get in trouble. I mean, like if they saw the bathroom was a mess, there were paper towels everywhere, they would freak out. They hated that.
Brian, is there such a thing as bad feedback?
I don't know. I mean, that's a fair question. I don't think so, because I think you have to accept whatever you're hearing. And, humility becomes a big part of this. It's easy for people to get defensive when they hear feedback that they don't want to hear, like they're kind of going into it and they just start to justify it away. Well, that one customer, they're just always a pain. They're always complaining. But you have to dive into it, and there has to be some nugget of truth to what they're saying. Otherwise, they wouldn't be complaining. Like if everything was perfect, would they complain? Like would there still? And maybe they would. I don't know. But you still got to try to figure out what in that feedback is something you can react to. So I don't think personally don't think there's such a thing as bad feedback. I think there's bad responses to feedback far more often.
You go to a fast food restaurant and at the bottom of your receipt, there's a code and you go log into their website and you use that code and you normally get paid for your feedback with a free sandwich or something like that. What are the ways that us as water treatment companies can actually encourage people to give us feedback, and what platform should we be using?
You have to play with different things on that, is what I would say. So it depends on what you want to gather and from who. But I think the key to it, and it's just like you walking out of the bathroom, it's got to be simple. It's got to be quick. And if it's not, then maybe you need to sit down and actually force the people to give you the feedback you want. It's funny you mentioned the receipt and logging in to do that. I don't have time. Like it's just too much. It's too much of a step.
You want to, but you don't do it.
But I never will, right? Like, and unless I get even an email from, an airline, unless I had like a really bad or a really good experience, I'm not going to answer that either because there's just too much to it. But if it's a quick, simple, like yes, no, one question answer, push a button, or if as I'm walking out, somebody asks me a question and it's truly one or two questions, I'm more likely to give that answer. So depending on what you're trying to get from your customers, I know we'll send out sometimes like a net promoter score. We'll send out like at the end of an email or something to customers. How likely are you to suggest this to somebody else? And it's just a quick yes, no, you kind of put some answers onto it. And we can gather up that data, but it's not 5 questions. It's not a 20-question survey. Because oftentimes, you get past the first page of one of those and you're done. Like even if you do have the best intentions in mind, you get after the first 5 questions and you're like, okay, I'm moving on from this. So again, I think you have to keep it simple. You can do more formal things. And that's where, again, I think you schedule the time and you sit down and you make sure that you have the audience to go through and do it and get the answers that you're looking to get.
Yeah, we talked about the free sandwich, and I did that at a Chick-fil-A, and I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm waiting for the meal. And it wasn't one question. It wasn't one page of questions. And then I looked there was a progress bar, and I was like only 10% complete. I'm like, what did I get myself into?
Consider is like anecdotal ways to collect data and collect feedback. So I know one of the things we do here is we can't issue a credit or a free replacement of an item until we log the issue in our system. And it adds an extra 30 seconds to the process, which, isn't that big of a deal. But it gives us a ton of data and information on the back end and allows us to start to track what's going on. And so we call them customer concerns here. And when one of them gets entered into the system, again, they can't, accounting can't give a credit. Our shipping department can't just pull another thing and ship it until this gets entered into the system. Our quality team then takes that information and they'll track it and trend it over time so we can identify where we're failing in processes. And when I say we track like anything that involves a replacement or a refund, it's anything, meaning like it could be UPS drop kicked the package, which they would never do.
That's what fragile stands for, right?
Yeah, kick harder. It could be that, the customer sent us bad information. Like that's happened, right? A customer sends us an order and they want 20 of something when they really meant to put in two, and they need to send back 18. Well, we still have to log that, and so we log it as a customer issue. But what it lets us do is really get granular with that kind of feedback, that information. Again, it's feedback. Something didn't go right. You didn't get your order perfectly. So how do we go back and then fix it? And so we can look at the trends on there. We can see if they're specific to certain customers, if it's specific to certain categories, and then how do we attack that and take care of it. And the other piece of that, going back to the culture and the mindset, is that email goes out to the entire executive team. So all of our managers, directors, even Frank gets those emails. And so we can look at those things and actually respond to them. And it isn't something that people are afraid of. It's almost, it's going to sound crazy, but celebrated. Like, it's an opportunity to improve. It's feedback we got to where we can now do something with it and be better, make our processes more foolproof, or make sure that everything gets out perfectly. And so some folks, and even when we make acquisitions, things like that, like companies that are like, well, I don't want to put that in. I don't want to get so and so in trouble. You're not getting anybody in trouble. Right? Like, we're going to celebrate the failure because now we can fix it. It just gives us an opportunity to make it better.
Now, that's key, because I bet there are a lot of people listening that's not how their team is going to receive the feedback. Their team is going to think, oh, we're going to get in trouble. Somebody's going to lose their job. Somebody's going to get written up. So how do you go from that to where you guys are now?
We always just point to, like, when's the last time we fired somebody for that, right? Or, sometimes people come to you like, well, am I going to get fired? And our answer is always, well, what did you do? I don't know. Like, tell me something you did that you should get fired for. I don't know. But no, it's just part of the culture, and again, how you approach it. And I think it is at all levels. And as you get bigger as an organization too, it's keeping that culture that way. So even when you bring in somebody new, you don't know what their background is. You don't know what company they came from and how people reacted. And so you just have to work on it over time and show and prove that that's not what's going to happen here, right? Like, we're not firing somebody because they miskeyed an order. Good Lord. If anything, we focus on the process, not the person, and try to improve it from there.
When it comes to the person you're trying to get the feedback from, there are better ways than others to ask questions. So, what are some things that you've learned to make sure that, one, you're going to get the information you need and the customer's happy to give it to you?
So I think the biggest thing there, obviously asking for the feedback and coming up with different ways. And some people are going to be different, right? Like, they want to verbally talk to you or they want to call you. Some people want to remain anonymous, and just troll you and give you the information that way, which is totally fine. But I think the other piece of it, and the biggest piece to it, is if you want to encourage this long term over time, is you have to respond to the feedback. You can't just ignore it, right? You can't ghost it, or you can't, like, just think it didn't happen or say, justify it away. You have to respond to it in a way that lets somebody know, I heard you, I understand, here's what we're going to do with that information now, right? And that way they now know that we care, that we want to hear what they have to say, whether it's an employee or a customer. They know that we're going to listen to what they have to say and then be more willing to share that information with us. But it is tough at first. And like I said, that's where you got to try some different tactics and different things to try to reach certain people. Sometimes it's a quick paper survey, maybe as you're walking out. Maybe you send an email or a link with your service reports whenever you send those off on Fridays or whenever you do it. Just different ways to do it. Maybe put on an invoice you're sending off. Maybe you have your marketing team sending those out. But you'll kind of figure out the best ways to gather that information depending on how people do it.
So let's say I order some reagent from you and it's in a 500 ml bottle, and I measure it and I only got 499 mils. So I'm now firing an email off to Deb, and I'm writing the scathing email of how I was shorted on this product. What happens then?
Deb puts that in our system right away, and she'll get you a replacement out right away. But she'll literally copy your words verbatim and put it in that customer concern, and that'll go out to the whole group. And so surely Frank and I will see that. We'll probably laugh and make some comment back to either you or to Deb about how ridiculous that was. But it will get in the system, and we'll certainly do that. And then when we respond to the customer, we'll follow up. We'll say, hey, thank you, received your information. We're going to get you out a replacement right away, get you taken care of. If you have any questions, certainly let us know.
That's a policy that you have always had. It doesn't matter how ridiculous maybe the feedback is, But you guys really stand by the customer is always right. The perception was I was cheated that 1 ml and you're going to make it right. I tell you, being the recipient of that over years, I've been super, super impressed with that. And the question I want to ask with that is now you're behind the scenes, and how ridiculous is this Trace Blackmore guy? I mean, he probably spilled the 1 mil when he was measuring the darn thing. How do you make sure that that culture stays the way it's been staying for dozens of years?
But the thing, like you're right though. Like it's you can't argue that you're wrong, right? Like you didn't get the extra 1 ml, so it's fair feedback, right? Like it's not like you're asking for ridiculous. And so really for us, it's okay. Let's go fix the process now. Let's go back and let's make sure whatever we're doing, if anything, let's err on the side of 1 extra ml, right? And that way you have that, and you don't call and complain anymore. So it's funny. I just thought of a story. I have a good friend who has a bunch of grocery stores in our area here, and she actually told me that there's a woman who will buy eggs, go home and weigh them, and if they don't meet the requirements of being large or extra large eggs, she will bring back to the store returned the eggs that didn't meet the requirement and ask for replacement eggs for those. True story. Blows my mind.
Now I'm going to have to look up what the size is for extra large, large.
Goes back, puts them on a balance, a scale, whatever, and figures out exactly what the weight was. Yeah, it's crazy.
I love that. All right, so let's say you decide that my complaint, my feedback was valid, and you're going to change something in your process. How do you initiate that?
So first, your feedback's always valid, right? Like maybe we won't change something because of that one thing that happened because it was a fluke or a weird thing, but it's always valid feedback, and we're going to hear it, and like I said, we're going to respond to it. So in lean thinking and in operational thinking, there's this thing called plan, do, check, act. And so it was interesting when I started doing the research on like feedback for the presentation I did for AWT, I found this thing called the ACAF customer feedback loop. And it follows basically the same pattern, which is ask, categorize, act, and follow up, right? So it's kind of like plan, do, check, act, but just a little bit different for feedback. So it's essentially saying like you ask for the feedback, you get it, and you categorize it into different buckets, right? Then from that, you make decisions on how you're going to react to that information. So then you act on whatever it is you got. And then again, the most key and most important part of it is the follow-up piece to make sure that somebody knows, I heard you, I implemented change, and thank you for doing that, right? Or even, I heard you, I didn't implement change, here's why, but thank you for the feedback, right? And either way, you're still closing that loop, which allows it to continue over and over again.
Now, internally, if you decide you did want to implement a change, how do you know that that change actually did take effect?
So we have a continuous improvement team here, it's almost like our SWAT team for lean manufacturing, but it actually goes to them. And so they'll kick off a project and work through it if it's a big enough one. We call them GSD events, not Kaizen events, but it stands for Get Stuff Done events.
It's not really stuff, is it?
No, it's not stuff. But we also just empower our employees to make change too. So we have in each one of our production cells a little info board where if they have opportunities to improve or they see an opportunity to make something different, they'll just do it on the fly and they'll just document, here's what I did and here's how I made it better. So depending on how big it is, it might kick off a big project. If it's a small thing, either our quality group or somebody from our CI team will go and just attack it and figure out a way to solve the issue and foolproof it. And again, you're going to get it right every time, maybe, maybe not. But as long as you make some sort of incremental improvement, you're heading in the right direction.
Brian, I know AquaPhoenix tracks everything. So obviously, if you're going to change something, you're going to assign metrics to it. What are some of the metrics that you would put behind that?
Yeah, so we track customer concerns monthly, and we post that on our production floor. And so not only do we track the total number of customer concerns, but we also bucket them by what category that concern falls into. So again, not hiding behind any of it. If you came and did a tour, we would show you that information as you walked through. We also use it when we do our customer reviews. So if we do a quarterly or annual or biannual review of the customer, we pull that information into there and we talk about it. We don't hide behind it. And we'll actually put together a percent of. So we look at the total number of orders you gave to us or total number of shipments we made. And we'll look at the total number of concerns and give you a percentage of that just to kind of show how we're trending. And even if it's a bad number, again, we don't hide behind it because it gives us opportunity to improve. And so that's where we can proactively talk to our customers and say, hey, we're kind of failing at order entry. what is driving that problem? How can we work together to make it better? Right. And sometimes it's the information we're getting from the customer. Sometimes, it's the way it's coming across in their generated form that comes from their ERP or whatever. But it gives us the opportunity to have the conversation, try to work with our customers or with our value stream to fix the issue. So on the continuous improvement side of it, what we do is we dive in and we actually look at the number of projects we completed. So we get a bunch of feedback even from our employees on the floor, for example. And I think, gosh, for about 2 years now, we've been tracking it. We got 1,200, 1,500 ideas that came from the production floor. And we've implemented, I think, 69% of those recommendations that came from the employees, just about things we could do or fix or whatever. And so anytime we're making change like that, we always want to document the current state, and we even take photographs. They use a theme from Up. So we have this guy, Kyle, who runs around and he puts on this little aviator hat, and he has a scrapbook that he puts together. And in the scrapbook, he'll put, here was the current state, here were the issues and the things we identified, and then here's what we improved about it. And that way we kind of know, like, oh, that's why we made that change, or that's how we made that improvement, to try to drive the errors out of the process or whatever it might be. So those are just some of the things we track on our side. But we also look at, like Net Promoter Score on our software and some things like that, just to see how that's trending and tracking. We use it in a few different places.
I love how Kyle dresses up as an Up character. That makes it fun. So if somebody's listening today, how do they go from just something we're going to do to we're going to make this fun?
Well, Trace, it's all about culture, right? Like it all comes back to that. And it's hard to change culture once it's in place. But I just think we've from the day one kind of built that fun culture into what we do here. That's why we say things like GSD and talk about gas a lot and things like that. It's just part of what we do to have fun. You're being paid to be at work, right? So obviously you'd rather be at home doing other things. So if you have to be here and you spend probably more time at work than you do at home, awake anyway, you might as well have some fun with it, right? Like don't come in and be miserable. So it's just part of our culture to have fun and make it fun for people. Because again, they come into here with some really different backgrounds of what they saw at other companies and how people did things. And so we have to get them AquaPhoenixized, right? And have them be part of the family and enjoy the culture we have.
On one of the visits I came up to see you guys, I remember there was an older lady working on your floor, and she had this bright pink shirt on that said, "I've got gas."
Favorite thing ever, right? Is getting a bunch of just grandmas and things like that wearing these shirts that say, "I've got gas." Yeah. And gas, of course, stands for give a shoot. But it's one of the things we talk about when we sort of want employees or don't want employees, right? Do they have gas? Do they want to be here? Do they want to work hard? And we'll find the right seat on the bus for them if they do.
Brian, over the years that you've been doing this, what are some lessons learned? What are maybe some mistakes that you've made that you can avoid us making those mistakes that you say, hey, don't do this. Don't do it this way.
It's that humility, Trace. And that's something I work on every day. I try to, when I get feedback, especially now, every time I feel that weird reaction, like that sort of tension that you build in yourself, I kind of ask myself, what's driving that? Where's that coming from? And 9 times out of 10, it's my ego, right? Like it's me trying to protect myself because I don't want to admit that we were wrong. I don't want to admit that something happened. I don't want to accept that feedback. And so I think that's the biggest thing I can tell you that I focus on or that I think about is that humility piece is when you get the feedback, and I didn't do it well when I was earlier in my career, you would get feedback from employees, customers, whatever, and your knee jerk is to get defensive and try to pretend like it either didn't happen or justify why it happened or talk through it and try to make it sound not as important as it is. Or like I said, oftentimes you'll see, that customer, it's always that customer. Okay, well, make it not that customer, right? Like, how do we make it better? And so I think that's the biggest piece is just really accepting that feedback for what it is, trying to find even any nugget of improvement out of it, and then working with that.
What is one of your proudest success stories that's come from this?
So I think my greatest success has been my personal improvement from it, right? Like taking the feedback that I get from others. And again, I look back in my career and over my years, even in personal relationships, things like that, and realizing like how poorly I oftentimes took feedback and how poorly I reacted to it. So I think that's been the biggest success. I would like to point to a project or something like that we've done, but I think working on yourself is an ongoing project sometimes, right? And so I think that is probably the biggest thing that I've learned is just personally how to take feedback and how to kind of think to myself when I get it, like, okay, what could I have done differently? What can I do better? How can I change? How can I improve? And not try to push it back on the other person or the customer or whoever it is.
The Scale Up Nation is listening, and there are people out there that are saying, I need to start doing this. I need to start getting information back from my customers, my team, fill in the blank, whatever it is. How should they start?
As I talked about, I think it's coming up with a plan. So, first off, what do you want to know? Like, what information are you trying to get from them? Second is keeping it simple, right? Coming up with a simple way to gather that information, but also multiple simple ways to gather that same information. Then figure out how are you going to condense all that down and track it. So where are you going to put all that data and all that information? What are you going to do with it? So you can actually analyze it and come up with trends or figure out, what the answer is. Then how are you going to react to it? Like, what are you going to do with that data once you get it? How are you going to implement it? Where are you going to go? How are you going to improve? And then finally, and again, most importantly, is how are you going to communicate back that you did it, that you listened, that you heard them, and that you want more feedback from them? So I think that's really what it's about. And like I said, there's a ton of different ways to do it. You can Google all sorts of things. There's net promoter scores that you can work on. You can look at customer effects scores, customer satisfaction scores, and all of them are just different scales and ways to do things. And that's where you see a lot of those questions about like strongly disagree, agree, don't agree, that kind of thing. But it's really coming up with what do you want to know? How are you going to ask the question? And again, maybe multiple ways to ask the question. How are you going to gather and keep that information? What are you going to do with it once you get it? And then finally, how are you going to react to it? How are you going to communicate back and follow up with what you did?
We're in the day where there's an app for everything. Do you have any that you recommend that can help us with that?
We do a fair amount through HubSpot. That's our CRM. It has some neat features and functions in there, especially with like the smiley and blank face and happy face, just to do some of those simple net promoter scores and things like that. We also do a fair amount through our ERP or some of our Power BI tools and Excel. Just kind of depends on what it is. App-wise, I don't know. There's nothing we use today that I can think of on an app.
Well, my last question is a survey question. Would you recommend your podcast host to a friend or family member?
All the time, Trace. I always tell people about you, especially people new to the industry. Like I don't know. Or the other example I use all the time is people ask me like, wow, like I have a weekly sales meeting and I'm looking for a technical topic. Like, well, Trace has 52 technical topics for you, maybe more. I don't know. How many. I think it's 52, right? Once a week you do something with James.
Absolutely, yeah.
There's always a topic there. So just every week he made it easy for you. Take that topic and run with it. So absolutely, I would recommend you, Trace.
Well, Brian, I've got some lightning round questions for you. So these are different questions because you've already answered the first lightning round. So you've made it to round 2. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right. What are you looking forward to most over the next 12 months?
Family. It's an easy one, right? So I got a little one coming here any day.
Little Trace?
Yeah, little Trace Katarski. Yeah.
That has a good sound to it, by the way. Let me just say that again. That's got a great sound to it.
Yeah, Trace Katarski. My wife's fighting with me about the baby's last name, by the way. She wants it to be her last name because her last name's Law, L-A-W, And so she's like, it's so much easier than Katarski. But no, definitely family. I'm so excited about that. And not just the baby part, but, just with my wife and growing our family and kind of growing together. Just excited about that.
I know AquaPhoenix has a great presence with all the different conferences that are out there, and you guys go to some that I've never heard of. So I'm kind of curious, what are your top conferences that you're going to make sure you hit this year?
Number one's AWT. We're always going to be there and do that. I'll be honest, I'm grounded right now. I'm not allowed because we're within like days of this baby coming. So for the next few months, I'm not going anywhere. But no, our team is hitting a bunch of regional shows. Since we bought Cometrics and brought them into the family, they were doing a ton of smaller little shows all around the country that we historically hadn't done as AquaPhoenix. We'd always just kind of gone to AWT. So, WEFTech, ACE, some of the big water shows we'll be at. Might even do some international ones later this year. So looking forward to it.
And then if you had a magic wand and you could change anything that's going on in the world, what would you change?
I think I'd focus on mental health. I think I would remove the stigmas and things like that around mental health and how we treat it and how we take care of it in society. I think I'm a root cause guy. And I think if you go back to the root cause of a lot of things that are out there, if we were able to deal with mental health better, I think it could improve a lot of things for a lot of people.
Totally agree with that. Well, the Scale It Up Nation wants to get to know Brian Katarski even better. So share a fun fact about Brian for us.
Oof. I was the president of my 4-H club growing up on a dairy farm. And I had a reserve state champion Ayrshire heifer when I was a kid. So there you go.
And the name of the heifer?
Cherish. Her name was Cherish. Yeah.
What do the 4-H's stand for? I don't remember.
Head, heart, hands, health.
There we go. You heard it here.
Yep.
Were you a future farmer of America?
I didn't do FFA. No, I did 4-H. And I will say, like, I'll put a plug in there for 4-H. It is not just for farm kids. They do things in cities, towns, wherever. They even have programs where if you don't live on a farm, you can lease an animal to learn to show and care for. But it was just such a good program for me. They make us do a ton of public speaking and presentations. And I think it just helps to kind of round people out.
We joked before we started recording, I've known you as Goose for at least 20 years. How did you get that nickname?
It's the Liberty Valance thing. So when the truth and the legend collide, what do, right? You print the legend. I don't know. I've heard a bunch of different stories about my childhood. I've heard, I run around like a maniac, and my uncle would say the goose is loose. I've heard my brother and sister misspelled goo, like baby's goo. They misspelled that and it said goose and it came from that. So I don't know. There's a few different legends out there, but we're just going to go with, I don't know.
Well, we appreciate having the legend Brian Goose Katarski on once again to the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Thanks so much for sharing. And I'm pretty sure that we're going to have some more members of the Scaling Up Nation start surveying their team, their customers, and getting all sorts of feedback.
Just got to accept the feedback. That's the biggest thing. Kill those egos, take the feedback for what it is, and do something with it, folks.
Once again, thank you, Brian. And I just mentioned this, but Nation, you have no idea how hard it was to call him Brian and not his nickname. I've known Brian for at least 20 years, and I want to say it was about 15 years ago. He asked me and other people to stop calling him by his nickname and start calling him Brian. And I tried so hard. But when you're so friendly with somebody and you know them so well and you've just called them by their nickname for so long, it was so hard for me. And he was so gracious. I think after about the 20th time I called him Goose instead of Brian, he said, you know what? Don't worry about it. You can call me Goose. He was so graceful with that. And now he doesn't care. You can call him Goose. You can call him Brian. So he is very gracious on allowing whomever to call him his nickname. So Brian Goose, thank you so much for not only coming on the show, but for being so graceful with me when I could not call you the name that you asked me to call you. Nation, what a great show today. We could all do so much more if we got feedback from the people that we are working with. I love the suggestion at the top of the interview where he was saying that he and his wife answer a question and then they create a conversation around that so they can know each other even better. The simple fact is when we get feedback, we can improve whatever we are getting feedback on. And I love how he talked about they have a culture of improvement and feedback is celebrated. It's not feared. And I know if you're in particular industries, if you're in particular companies, that might be something that just seems so foreign because feedback is not looked at in that light. It is my hope that you and all the people that you are thinking of that are not looking at feedback properly, listen to this episode and you now celebrate feedback just like AquaPhoenix, and you decide to improve based on that feedback. One of the prime examples of how feedback is celebrated is this very podcast. Nation, I started the show by telling you I had no idea what I was doing at first. And I went out to people that I trusted and people that were listening to the show. There were not that many in the beginning. And I asked them, how can I make the show better? What do you want to hear? Who do you want me to interview? What do you think some segments should be? And this show was completely designed by the listeners. And that has just been so cool because I was learning how to produce a podcast and I was hoping to put together a good show. I know we put together a good show now, and it's because of all of that feedback. People are not shy to share what they feel about certain shows, how shows could be improved, who we should be interviewing, what topics we should talk about next. In fact, that's not a request anymore. That's a necessity. Folks, we're not going to get to 1,000 episodes without your help. So within your feedback, we take all that, we make the show better, and we program future content based on all of that information. So, Nation, if you've got something you want to tell us about, please tell us about it. You can do that by going to scalinguph2o.com, going over to our show ideas page. And even if it's not of an idea, even if it is some criticism, some feedback, whatever it is that's going to help us be better, just write that in that section and it will help our team. Nation, I love it that we've got that kind of relationship that we can tell each other anything, and we're going to use that anything to make this show even better. Nation, somebody that is making this show better each and every week is our friend James McDonald. And he was one of those people that I called in the very beginning, and he definitely told me what he thought this podcast should become. So, James, thank you for that. And thank you for this brand new Drop by Drop with James.
Welcome to Drop by Drop with James, the podcast segment where we wonder, explore, think about, imagine, and learn industrial water treatment, you guessed it, drop by drop, together. In today's episode, we're thinking about BOD and COD. First, what do these acronyms stand for, BOD and COD? How are they measured? Is one of them always equal to or higher than the other? Why would BOD or COD be used in water treatment? What can impact the BOD or COD of a water? What water treatment can change it? I'm James McDonald, and I want to encourage you to be like water by forming bonds with those around you, dissolving new knowledge, and making worthy ripples, drop by drop.
Well, thank you, James. And Brian, once again, thank you for mentioning how people are using not only this podcast, but the segments by James McDonald to increase their technical prowess. I have heard of so many people that are using these podcasts in their weekly meetings, and they will actually assign somebody to be in charge of that podcast, and everybody listens to it, and then that person will lead the discussion. I've heard that from so many teams, and that just is amazing to me. That is exactly what I hoped this podcast would be used for. Our goal is to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry. And when I hear things like that, I know that we are doing that, but we're not doing that. We are doing that. The entire Scaling Up Nation is helping this industry get better, and I want to thank you for that. Nation, we are going to have a brand new episode for you next Friday. But until then, I hope that you have a tremendous week. I hope you get some feedback this week, and I hope you use that feedback to make whatever you are doing that much better. Have a great week, folks. Do you wish you had your very own private tutor to help you prepare for the Certified Water Technologist exam? If so, I've got you covered. Don't fret another moment. Go to scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep today and take my CWT practice exam course. The course will give you the information you need to stop worrying and start taking the next step in your professional journey. Get the private tutor you've been looking for by visiting scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep.